So I thought that was really nice and beautiful, and it just made me really sad. It's
Yeah.
just, especially if you have mommy issues, maybe don't read this book.
I definitely would love to know what it's like to maybe have a mother that loves you too much instead of not enough, I guess. I'm just hopping in because we did not film this at the beginning of the episode, but Mariah and I have adopted a Palestinian family that is currently still stuck in Gaza. Mohammed's neighborhood was bombed and killed 22 members of his family, leaving him responsible for his 4 younger siblings who were pulled from rubble. We have their family's GoFundMe linked in the description below, and they are very close to their goal, so please donate below. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today, we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing The Jinn Daughter by Rania Hanna. Don't forget there's a link below to sign up for our free newsletter, where you can get more information and updates about us in the podcast. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host, Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host, Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms. Moving on to the book, The Jinn Daughter. We were actually sent this for free for the podcast.
Yes, we were gifted.
Yes.
This is very cool. We were very excited because this doesn't happen because we are, crazy tanky Marxist, whatever you want to call us. So the fact that somebody was willing to reach out and be like, hey, you want to read and review our book? It's like, hell yeah.
Yes.
Whatever you say.
We're communists. We don't want to have to work for your book. Just kidding. But no, we want to thank Rania Hanna for reaching out to us and giving us the book, but we will be saying our true opinions. Our opinions have not been bought. These are what we actually feel about this book and how we felt as we read it. I just wanted to make sure nobody thinks
that we're
sellouts. We're not. We may be communists.
No, I don't know how you could read a whole book and then just like lie about your review just to sell it. Like that seems so backwards.
I don't know. Like I feel like
but I know people do it.
Yeah, like I know people do it, but I feel like especially it may just be the autism in us, but I don't think I could lie if I wanted to about it. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I would slip up or something, you know? But
I'm not a good liar.
Overall, but this book just recently came out. We're filming this in May, so it just came out last month too. So it's new, and it's Rania Hanna's debut novel. And I will just say, as a debut novel, I think it's a really strong debut novel.
It is very strong. I have read a lot of people's debut novels, even like 3 or 4 into like their profession or hobby of being like an author, and some people's books are not readable. Like it reads like something that would be on Wattpad or AO3.
Yes.
And that's fine. Like those are fine if you like reading fan fiction. But no, this reads like it is I was really blown away originally when we went to read this.
Yes.
By how well it is written.
And I don't mean this as a diss to like Rania Hanna, but like a lot of the times when you see people online and stuff, they recommend these books, like Gothicana is an example of like a book that's like been recommended that's like the greatest thing they've ever read, and read it, and that is a TikTok Wattpad book, which I mean, I don't want to diss Wattpad or AO3. I think there's very well written things on there, but Gothicana was not one of those things, and I was worried that this could have been like similar to that, but I think this is much more traditionally published author like Leigh Bardugo, Olive Blake, like all of those types of authors. If you like that, you will like The Jinn Daughter, I think, personally.
Yes, I think I know we're like getting really ahead of ourselves in this episode because we're really excited. But this is kind of like the vibes I had wanted from The Familiar from Leigh Bardugo. I don't know, because I didn't have really any ideas of what The Familiar was going to be like, but this was just so much more like emotionally impactful and like speculative and reflective. It implored a lot of like I don't know, there was just something about it that was really special. So
yes,
I just really appreciated this book.
I'm sure you could probably relate more to it too, being a mother yourself. So basically, for those of you that don't know, this book is called The Jinn Daughter. It's about this woman Nadine who is, I don't know, they call her, I'm not very knowledgeable in like Middle Eastern mythology, which I know this is like what the taste from, but the Kawati is like her.
Yeah, that's what I would call it.
I don't know if it's
right?
like a job or like just like what she does, but basically she collects the souls for all the people that pass within the region that she lives in, and they manifest themselves into pomegranate seeds and drinks the juice from the pomegranate seeds to help these souls pass on into the afterlife of Moat. But like that's basically what like their end goal for the souls to go, which is just like a nice place for them to be resting. And basically what happens is she has her daughter, and her daughter is kind of more not rebellious, I would say, but she's definitely like a free spirit and like and stuff like that. And as
She's a teenager,
yeah,
right? Like she's coming of age, becoming her own person.
yeah,
So it kind of like makes sense. I'm like, okay, she's like had her brain turn on and realize that she was like her own autonomous being, and she's wants to do her own thing.
yeah. And then Nadine is having issues then because the seeds of death, the pomegranate seeds, are no longer showing up at her doorstep. So it's a lot of trying to figure out what's going on with that, with the mystery of that, and then also dealing with this beautiful relationship of a mother and a daughter, and trying to get through life with this mystical fantasy element, basically. I feel like that's, I don't know if you want to say more about it for people that may be interested.
It's rooted in Middle Eastern mythology, which is not anything that I've ever read before or was familiar with. But
I don't
it's
feel
just
like
it's really interesting, like how she's able to articulate this storyline and have these elements of fantasy, but it's not in the normal way that we see with like Sarah J. Maas or even like the Grishaverse, where it's kind of like the forefront. Like it's there, but it's not necessarily overpowering like the characters and like those internal conflicts. Like it's pretty
mhm.
balanced. So
I think
if you go into this, don't expect a high fantasy.
yeah.
It's not that. It's something different, but it is just as good.
I mean, something me and Mariah were comparing it to the whole time we were reading it was like The Masters of Death by Olivia Blake, one of my favorite books from last year. And I do think that this is similar in like the way that like Masters of Death is fantasy, but it's so rooted very much in like the real world with like real people that live in like a regular earth and things like that, where there's like kind of like different realms that they end up going to like in Masters of Death. But I think if you read Masters of Death and enjoyed like the fantasy setting and how that world played out, I think you would like this, because I think they're very comparable. Where one is maybe more
And
rooted
it's
in
significantly more diverse. I think that
yes,
is like a key element here is like it is so much more diverse because it
mm-hmm.
is like set in the Middle East.
Yes,
So it's not like a white fantasy.
yes. I think it's something very refreshing to read too. After like everything that is promoted on Book Talk is white fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Um,
everything is like white centric, western centric type
mhm.
of fantasy. And it gets old because it's all like the same storyline kind of like regurgitated over and over again. And it's very boring.
Yeah, it's just
So
like
this
the
was like
same
a breath of
tropes.
fresh air.
And I think one thing too that was really different, that's not something that you normally get, especially in young adult fantasies, is that it follows the mother's perspective. When typically in more modern fantasies and white YA fantasies, it's following the young girl and like her, how she would be reacting to. I think is it's an interesting insight to read.
No, but even like having a protagonist or a main character that is older is really nice.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about Rania Hanna?
So what I was able to garner, and like I've seen her social media, but on Goodreads it says that she's a Syrian American writer and researcher, and she is a neuroscience doctoral student at George Mason University. So I think that's a really interesting career to be
Mm-hmm.
headed in, and then to like be able to write this.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
It reminds me of
I
like
think it's fantastic.
RF Kwong, because you know how like being like all this schooling, but then also writing this like crazy fantasy like series and novels and stuff like that.
Yes, yes. I
I
almost made that comparison too, but I was like, I don't know if Kristen will be on the same page.
but I'm like, I could never have the time. Like I already don't do that much, and I can't even find the time to like sit down and write a book or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
So so that's impressive. One is like being able to write a novel while you're doing your doctorate.
mm-hmm.
That blows my mind.
That is a crazy feat. speech that I will never be able to. Rania Hanna has no controversies that we could find on the internet. Thank the Lord.
Yeah, I didn't see any. I didn't see anything. I think it's because I can't imagine there being anything unless it's from, say, reactionaries. Because on Rainia's social media, she posts like Free Palestine stuff. So I can imagine people
Yeah.
be like, "Oh my God, she supports the Hamas" or something fucking stupid.
Yeah.
But there's nothing. So if
Yeah.
you want like a good diverse author that's like supports the cause, down with the cause,
I
Rainia, I think is going to be one of those people.
And I think me and Mariah are both very excited if Rania decides to do writing more and decides to publish more novels, that me and Mariah will definitely be purchasing and reading those.
Yes. And collector's edition. I want some sprayed edges.
Yeah.
I want all of it.
It's got
Overall ratings for this
yeah,
is pretty good,
it's got pretty I mean
I
it
would
doesn't
say.
have very many compared to like anything that we've pretty much read, because I think a lot of the stuff that we do end up reading here is popular, very popular books, and so a lot of the times they have hundreds of thousands of ratings, while this one only has 2,000 on Goodreads. Like Goodreads are total.
Oh, sorry, I didn't put that. That's just Goodreads. That was
Okay.
what I looked up. Is most people spend time on like Goodreads because it's so
Yeah.
mainstream.
But 4.26 stars is still really good.
It's really solid. And I went through and I read the criticisms, and some of the criticisms were really they
Mm-hmm.
were silly. I didn't like them. And then I went through their accounts and I saw what they rated 5 stars, because that's what I do with most people when I go and
Yeah.
see,
So
like, why
don't.
did you rate this bad? Mind you, it was only the 3 star ratings. Like, it was 3 star ratings that had like the actual text reviews. There was 1 1 star, and then there was like 2 2 stars, but it was the 3 star reviews where most of the criticism was coming from. And just know I will stalk you and read all of your reviews.
On Goodreads.
If you leave something bad on my 5 star review or book that I read, I'm like, why? Why do you think that? And I did find that a lot of people that rated it low rated SJM and like Rebecca Yarros really high.
Hmm.
And I found that really interesting. And it's like,
That is really
what else?
interesting.
They didn't. I was like, they wanted like a high fantasy. That was like the reoccurring theme that I saw, is that they wanted it to be like more fantasy, and they didn't like how it was literary fiction and speculative fiction. They
Then
wanted a
read a
head
different
empty
book.
type of
Like,
story.
I don't understand, because like I understand like wanting that in like a fantasy novel, but then obviously this novel is not for you. If you were looking for a high fantasy with whatever dragons or whatever else you want going on, this is not that. This is just a very sweet, well written like novel about a relationship of a mother with her daughter. And I think that's if that's not what you want in a book, that's fine, but you don't want to sit here. I think it's hard to criticize a book for something that it's not, or nor that what it was trying to be, you know?
Yeah, especially when it's like it's not a problematic book.
Yeah.
There really isn't any like problematic issues to it. I did say someone say that they didn't like that the author had used like the G slur to describe like
Mm-hmm.
Roma people, but again, I don't know how that is in the Middle East. I don't
Yeah.
know how it's received over there. So it's like I don't feel like I'm qualified. So when I see like a white person
Yeah.
who's saying this about like a author of color, I find that really
Mm-hmm.
strange. So I don't know if that's valid or not, but I will mention that was like the only semi-valid piece of criticism, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't know the cultural surrounding around some words.
Yeah.
So
But I think also as like
I
white
don't know.
Americans, we don't know, like we know like here specifically that we are not going to say that word or use that word, because that's not something that's appropriate within like the United States lexicon. But then the thing is there, and then also like within Middle Eastern mythology, I don't know enough about it to know that if what he was referring to was specifically like Romani people, or whether or not it's more like with the mythos of that, you know?
Yeah, so it's definitely something me and Kristen just aren't knowledgeable enough about it. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious. And even then, I think it was only like
This,
2 times maybe it was messaged. It would be
yeah,
a really easy fix in the book to
yeah,
have a reprint, revision, if it is not done in like good faith or
yes.
something. Like that's not a problem that could, if the author were to take it and read it and be like, okay, I'm going to change this,
And I
no problem.
know
So
a lot of people, even here, like in the United States, don't even know that like that is like a slur to use against Romani people. You know what I'm saying? Like I
yeah,
know
I
it's,
didn't know that until TikTok.
but
No, because like around here, like small town vibes, they used to have that on like stores.
Mm-hmm.
Like they didn't allow. It would be like no, like they were weird, but they were like no G slurs allowed. So like
Oh.
that was just something I saw on stores around here. So I didn't know it was like a slur until like 2-3 years ago. And I was like, oh my god, I had no idea.
Yeah, I
So
do think
I
that's
don't know.
something
I
too.
wouldn't be surprised.
But I think it's also something too because like the Romani people do not really live in like the United States north of the here. It's a lot more in Europe and stuff like that. So I think it makes sense that a lot of Americans are ignorant about that term.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know, even like if you're from America specifically, like I'm not gonna like if I hear you use that, I'll be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't use that. You know what I mean? But it's not like gonna be like you're berated and canceled for using that word. It's like, hey, like you may not be aware of the history with this. And that's what the main thing is for everyone to do is to learn and to try to do better
Yeah,
and
it's
not
not hard
intentionally.
just to be like, hey, um, I have heard that it's more preferred to say the Roma people as opposed to the G slur. So,
Yes.
and like, that's all you got to do.
Yes. And if that
It's not a
person
problem.
decides to continue to use that word, then they're the asshole. Like they're the ones that have need to look within themselves on why they want to continue using hateful speech when they've been aware that it's a hateful word or hateful speech. Anyways, moving on from that. Not that that's
Let's talk
really
about
much
praise.
relevance.
Praise for the book. Most everybody, regardless, even in the criticism, talked about how beautiful it was written.
It is written
This
very
is,
beautiful.
oh my god, it's like poetic at
Mhm.
times. It's just really lovely. It's just a really nice read. It was nice on the brain. Just
Mhm.
being able to like the imagery, I think is what was so interesting.
I could
Just like the overall
so
style
like the
too.
cottage, I could perfectly like imagine like the circular cottage in my head of like them sleeping on their cots next to each other and things like that, and then like the cemetery being in her backyard and things like that. Like I could just picture like that little area of where they lived like so perfectly. I think it was just descriptive in the perfect amount of way where it wasn't overly descriptive because I feel like that is a lot of issues that I think a lot of debut novels want to make sure that the author is accurately portraying what they're seeing in their mind to other people's minds. But I think a lot of the time whenever you're reading, I know for like me personally, like sometimes I'll be reading a book and they'll be like they had black hair and blue eyes or something that like 50 pages in the book after they've already introduced the character, and it's like I've already imagined what this character looked like. You can say he has black eyes, black hair, blue eyes all you want, but in my head that's a blonde man. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
I
so
think
they do it like the author does such a good job starting out by
yes.
just very slowly incorporating it by keeping the world building so small rather than just like that typical high fantasy like word vomit where you're just getting all the lore off the bat.
Yes.
Like it's just trickled in really nicely. You start small, it expands a little bit. You're not getting too much of the world all at once, so it's not overwhelming.
And I also think too, as someone who's not well versed in Middle Eastern mythology, and I know Mariah's not either, I do feel like this is something that like even though I don't know the ins and out of Middle Eastern mythology, I do think it is written well enough where you don't have to have any prior knowledge. Everything is explained very clearly and simply so that if you are an outsider like Mariah or I reading into the story, you can easily learn the dynamics of the way that their mythology works.
Yes, and speaking of the mythos, that was another praise that a lot of people had was that they really enjoyed learning about a different mythology
Mm-hmm.
through like this like literary tool, like this book that we had. So we were able to kind of get some insight because a lot of times the extent of our mythology, every time I pick up like anything's like oh mythology, it is like
Greek.
Greek
Yes.
or Roman.
Yes.
Occasionally I'll get like Nordic, and that's I'm like wow, we're mixing it up here.
Yeah.
Um, but that's
But
about
it's
it.
still very white. As you can see
Yeah.
right here behind me, I have all of my Percy Jacksons, which is of course mostly Greek, but of Roman mythology. But I mean, right here I have the Kane Chronicles, which is Egyptian mythology, but it's still written by a white man. Like how much,
Womp womp.
you know? Like Rick Riordan, I have beef with you. We won't go into that, but I have beef with Rick Riordan. That's all I'll say about that. But I do think that this is very well written, and this is a great insight that I feel like it makes me want to read more like Middle Eastern mythology. I don't know what like if it's very region specific or if it's more, you know what I'm saying? Like if there's more
Yeah,
like
because we aren't like
individualized.
completely immersed in like what part of a country they're in. You're kind of just dropped in. And
Mm-hmm.
I again I don't know a lot about like territories and how they were taken over and changed, like Ottoman Empire and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not super familiar with. So I just would like to know so I can like figure out which books I want to read
Yeah.
after that. Maybe we'll message Brady and be like, please send me some book
Yeah.
recommendations.
Yeah, I think that would be very nice and very fun. But I think other than that, for before we go into the spoiler zone for these, we both really enjoyed this book. We're both gonna, I think, recommend it. I gave it a 4.5 stars on Storygraph. I almost said Goodreads. Ew.
I also gave it 4.5 stars. Which is interesting. Chris and I very rarely rate a book the same
Mm-hmm.
way. Usually it'll be like either a whole point or even like a little fraction, but we pretty much
Mm-hmm.
had it down 4.5
Yes.
stars, and then we rounded up on Goodreads for a
Yes.
5-star read.
Yes. I think Rania deserves the Goodreads boost anyways. Like, I think even if
Oh, absolutely.
it wasn't a perfect 5-star read for me, which I think I'm very strict with my ratings too. Mariah makes fun of me all the time how strict I am with my ratings, and but I think this holds up. I mean, this was better than The Familiar in every types of way, which I mean, Lee Bardugo is my ride or die, but I do think this should be what TikTok books promote. If you're looking at something similar to like Masters of Death or like The Familiar and things like that, I do think that this book can fit on in with that.
I would have to agree. I think it sits, I would even like almost put it in the same category that we like put like Ring Shout and Babel
Oh yeah.
and whatnot. Like I think this sits in that
I
type of
was gonna
fiction.
say it definitely reminded me of Ring Shout whenever I was reading, especially like the length of it. It's a very short novel. It's like 200 and some change. It's like a little bit more than 250 pages, I think, roughly, which is a very short and condensed novel. And of course, me and myself wishing it was longer. But I do think that the emotional impact was well written and things like that. And there was a scene where I was tearing up reading, which
As was I.
we can go into that into the spoiler zone. But I do think it is very emotional for even the short amount of pages that it was, and I think it's done beautifully.
This is a book I really wish I could like gatekeep. I know it's important that other people read it, but I just know that like when more of those like SJM
People.
fans and like Rebecca Rios, they're gonna pick it up and they're not gonna get it, and then they're gonna rate it low
It reminds me of like
because
that
they have
Grapey
no media literacy.
video where
Yes.
she like talks about, if anybody doesn't know, I'm like Grapey's biggest fan. I go to her account and watch every one of her videos like every day. But she was talking about how like we shouldn't force people that only like to read SJM and Rebecca Yarros, force them to read more diversely, because then they'll just end up review bombing books that are actually good because they don't sit there and understand everything if it's not spelled out for them. And I think a lot of this book too, it's told a lot because of Nadine. She is able to extract the stories from people's souls, and like the stories are a lot more like conceptual, where they're not like telling the story specifically of one person's life that he was born and then he murdered someone and then he blah blah blah, like, and then he was a bad guy.
No, it's like a theme.
It's like you get like
It's like a very short kind of like folk story is what
yes.
their souls morality gets turned into, like one condensed like 2-page kind of story that you'd get told as a child
Yes.
perhaps.
Not like the specific story of people's lives. And I think that's very interesting. That's why I think like people that are rating like SJM and Rebecca Yarros very high would not understand. They'd be like, how is this person's life? It's following two people. That makes no sense, sort of thing.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so, I mean, I do think more people should read this because it's a beautifully written book. I think if you're a fan of the podcast, you'll probably have an easy time understanding it. But if you're somebody who only reads like Penelope Douglas, SJM, Rebecca Yarros, I'll call them out. I don't care. H.G. Carlton, who else? Those type of novels. Maybe this isn't for you, but I also do think that maybe if you want to try to challenge your own beliefs and understanding more than what you currently know, that this would be a great place to start. I do think it's not a complex read in any way. I think this could be a great book for like English classes, honestly.
Yeah, I could see that being in like high school English class
Yeah.
and reading it and kind of analyzing it. I think that would be really nice.
Especially like even if it's not the whole things, but like the little folk stories. It reminds me of like Aesop's fables. They remind me of the little like the souls of the dead's their stories. You know, Aesop fables.
No, I never read that.
It's not like a book. They're just like fairy tales, like the rabbit and the hare, or the tortoise and the hare,
Oh,
like
okay.
those types of
Why
things.
didn't you say
What
that?
do you mean? That's like Aesop fables. Like he's got a bunch,
I didn't know
like all
that's
the
what it was
different
called.
ones. Like all like where the animals and things like that. Like it's like that's what the souls like stories are like Aesop fables. Or like they have overarching messages like that. Okay, but I think moving on specifically to the spoiler zone, right? Unless you have anything else you want to say.
Nope.
Nope.
That's it. We can just get into it.
Okay.
Brother, I was reading this on the couch, and the part where Ilias
Was
is like
dying.
having to pass
Okay.
on,
Oh my
is
god, bro.
dying.
I was
I
like,
think second time, I was sitting here like,
I was
no.
sad. I was sad
This
because
is
like
like what's so good about this is because she kills off characters, and I
yes.
knew as soon as this was happening, it's like, oh, Kristen's rating just went fucking
Yeah,
skyrocketed.
that kind of was wherever I decided because most of what the for those of you that don't have your kids, make the video on.
We gonna do it? No,
No,
that's so funny.
was I saying? Oh, that was
We're
around the
talking about
time whenever I
Ilias
was like,
and dying.
most of the time this book was sitting at like a 3.75 4-star, I think, but it went up like I think it was like I think I said it was like 3.75 most of the way through. But whenever that scene was, it was just very romantic because like she was like saying like I understand I have to let you go, and then you get her thoughts where it's like but I'm gonna think about you every second of every day and stuff like that, which is like really like sad. I was like, damn.
Well, it's like it's even more sad when you like get like those little like stories where she's telling her daughter about like their story and they met when they're young, and then
Mm-hmm.
she like gets pregnant and she has to like give birth, and then the sheik,
They
like Elias's father, wants to steal the baby, so
and he
the son is
does.
like, okay, just kill me, bring me back, and like, use that as leverage. And she's too young in her power, so she can't bring him back, but she keeps his seed on the shelf for like 14 years or
Yeah,
something, and then he sacrifices himself
to save
for
his
his daughter.
daughter.
And it's just, oh fuck,
And
man, she
it's
had me. I'm like
it's
sitting on the couch, and Brandon's trying to show me Pokemon. I mean, I'm just like, I can't right now.
it was just like it's crazy because like even though you don't know like Ilias like that much, you just kind of get the like it's sad because he was never there to like raise his daughter, been dead the whole time because is it Layla?
I think so.
Layla?
Layla.
Layla? Because she was taken at a young age by his father and stuff like that, and he killed himself so early on in like their relationship and everything. It's like they haven't even gotten that much time together in the times that they only have had together because like I would say maybe like a year or so is probably how much they actually had to be fully in love where they're both themselves and fully into this relationship before because she got pregnant young on accident and then she had this baby and the baby got taken away and then he killed himself all within like the span. I would say that's probably within the span of like 2 years, and I don't think that's ever enough time to be with the love of your life. I don't think 100 years is enough to be with the love of your life if it's someone that you truly care for and put your heart and soul into. So it's very sad too because of him being in this like mix like in between worlds of death and life because she hasn't sent his seed on, because since he did kill himself he would go to I don't remember what the name of it is.
It starts with a J.
Yeah, but I think it's supposed to be like symbolizing like obviously not like hell, but like something like of that vein where it's eternal suffering. And because he killed himself, that's where his soul will end up going. And you can tell Nadine does not have the heart in it, even though it's because he's sacrificing himself to go to this place for his daughter to bring her back to life. It's still wrong because what he did was always for his daughter, and he's going to eternally suffer for his daughter. And it's so sad.
Yeah, especially when you think like he only got like those 60-second like gleans
Yeah, every
like per
morning.
day. Like he got
Yeah.
to see her one minute every morning to see like his daughter grow up. Well, that's rough, man.
And then now Nadine is all on her own, being a single mother with like a father-in-law who's a villain. I think one
He's
thing,
literally like Disney villain, evil.
yeah, I don't think he was developed well enough for my liking. I think that's kind of a reason why I don't think it as a perfect 5-star, because I do think he could have been a compelling villain if we had more time with him. While it was kind of more like twisty mustache villain in the background sort of thing, where you don't really get to see him doing these things, where I didn't even know like if he was really like that evil until like you hear that
he died?
yeah, well, like whenever he died, and then also like whenever like you found out that he kidnapped the baby. But that's also like, why did he kidnap the baby? You know,
Because he didn't want the baby raised by Jinn. And
but
I
then
don't know,
it's
I
like
think
the
he like
babies are
wanted her to love him because his son didn't love him, so he's like wanted that like emotional connection. So he was trying to like get it from Layla.
which I think if that was more more like focused on or discussed more, I think it could have been more like it felt more impactful, especially whenever you find out that like, oh, he's actually been this terrible person this whole time, and he's going to eternal suffering, and you can't actually use his seed to bring back Layla, you know, where I think
That was rough. Where he's like, I'm doing this for her, but then like it still didn't matter because he was just such a bad person through and through.
yeah.
Like he did so many shitty things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
nah, man.
Didn't even you can't even save your own grandkid, bro.
I'm trying to think of what else really caught me off guard.
I think
I think Rami also should have been developed a little bit more.
I can
I think
agree
that
with
would have been
that.
nice.
Yeah, like what he was fighting for, and then he kind of feels like whenever he dies, he just dies, and that's it. I
Yeah.
liked,
Even though he did end up like killing Sale.
but
I think that's how you say her name.
yeah, but like I didn't understand that enough either, because I think like even though she was killed by him, like was it actually an accident? We still don't really know. You know what I mean? And then who killed Layla? Because she said she felt a hand on her back, but we don't know whose hand it was. Was it
I
Rami?
don't think it was ever confirmed.
Yeah, and that's something
I
that's
assumed it was Rami because then we find out as soon as like Sale wakes up in like Layla's body, she's like crying to her mother, and is saying like he pushed me.
yeah,
So
but that's well, we already knew that he killed Sale, but we don't know that he killed Layla.
I feel like that was the insinuation, but also it wasn't clear. So that I think it would have been nice if that was more
Well, because
transparent, not
then I
just
feel like
like
less bad for him,
subjective.
because he if he would have killed her. Whenever I don't feel like he was ever like malicious. He wanted to do right by death by bringing Sale back. You know what I mean? Which is why in the end he betrayed, quote unquote, Nadine by switching their seeds. You know, which I thought was that was a really interesting twist. I was not expecting like Sale to wake
No,
up
I wasn't
and
expecting that either. I was like, in the wrong
Layla.
body. I was
Yeah.
like,
That
oh
was so
no.
crazy. Well, that's what I'm saying, because I feel like if he were doing that, he wouldn't have, because he wanted to bring Sale back because he obviously felt wrong about him killing her, you know, for death, so he can have that opportunity death, because he doesn't have like his family to live for since they're turned into clay figurines. I mean, so it, and then he was doing that to bring her back to get that opportunity to become death. I don't know why he would keep Layla dead or kill her in the first place to make her death, unless, and then I feel like
No, that was confusing.
do you know what I'm trying to say? I know it's like kind of like weirdly worded, but and then I don't know. I guess it could have been like one of like the people that she threw horse shit at the beginning of the game, at the beginning of the book, you know. But I don't think that was clearly stated. But I did like the ending. I thought it was really interesting because the story that I think Sale's seed said was about like the two daughters that were like separated, or they were like the moon and the sun daughters. I really liked that like little story. I thought it was really cool to see like that with Sale, Layla becoming both death, and like how they're like that story. And it's interesting how that story was told for Sale, even though she died already so young.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
It makes you wonder. It's almost like it was like
Like
meant to
fate.
be.
Yeah, fated happened this way. And like Sale had to be dead for so long before Layla could have became that same age and died at that same age. Be like two sides of the same. I thought that was very well done, and I liked that. And I liked that like if you reread it, like if you got to that point in the story, I think if you read like that Aesop Fables thing, you could get like see like the foreshadowing of.
That'd be nice. I could probably reread this. Maybe I don't read a lot of fiction, but I could definitely see that like picking up more the second time around.
Because you're more aware of how like the out and stuff like that. That's one of the things I love rereading and seeing like the foreshadowing from things I might have not caught the first time reading through.
I'm trying to think if there's any other elements other than just her like it, like the whole story, right, is like critiquing um Nadine and her mothering, like what it means to
Yes.
be a mother, and can you love your child too much?
I think the answer is yes.
And we do, we see that as we're
Yes.
progressing, and all the way up until she consumes Layla's like seed,
Her actual
that you
seed.
see that she wanted to keep her safe and just loved her so much to the point where Layla just couldn't, she wasn't able to be her own person and be able to like venture out into the world. Like she was kind of
Stuck.
confined
Yeah.
into like this safety net, and it wasn't like ill intended. Like
Yes.
Nadine wanted like the best for her child, and I think that's like what most parents, I would even argue like most people in society want for the youth is like the absolute best scenario. But if you just like keep them in a box and don't allow them to grow and become like their own person, like you become resentful and you're not able to
Yeah.
like flourish. So she sees this at the end, and like how Layla, it just blooms in death, because
Yeah.
that's like her biggest thing is she just doesn't want her to die.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was really nice and beautiful, and it just made me really sad. It's
Yeah.
just, especially if you have mommy issues, maybe don't read this book.
I definitely would love to know what it's like to maybe have a mother that loves you too much instead of not enough, I guess.
Doesn't that
Um
make you wonder? Like you sit here and you're like, man, like would my mom do this?
I think mothers should not love their child too much or not enough. It needs to be a perfect place in the middle where you love your child the perfect amount so your child can perfectly be a well-balanced human being.
And I don't think that can exist under our current economic structure. Late stage capitalism is hindering that, and I think it is only attainable under um, late
Communism.
stage communism.
Yeah.
So the solution,
If you want your mom to love you,
indirect solution,
if you want your mom to love you, join your local communist
organization.
yeah, join your no- I don't know, I can think of the word. Begin organizing, and then one day you too can be a mother that loves your child the right amount, or father, because I think
Or just parent
yeah,
in general, just parental figure, guardian figure.
yeah, I feel so bad for like Ilias though, because
He
like
really got the worst end of
he
it.
like
He was
went
so
through eternal
sweet the whole
suffering, but
time.
like he didn't even have to technically. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's like where it like a highlighted like Nadine was so blinded by her
Her love for her
desire,
daughter.
like her love, and it's just needing to bring back her child so that she wasn't alone and she like had her to love and take care of, that
But I think that's
she
how
had to
like
sacrifice.
Ilias he falls into that trap too because he's willing to do it. He chooses to do it.
Yeah, because
Whereas
most parents should want to be able to sacrifice themselves in order to save their children.
okay.
Say most because I saw that TikTok of the moms, like the interview, and they're like, "Would you, um, what was it? Would you shoot
Would you
someone or
kill
kill someone
for your child?
for your child?" And they were just like, "I couldn't do that." And I'm like,
I think it depends on the situation. I think it's a very situational base. Because I mean, I also don't have children, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. But I think I have said on here before too that I was like, if I if Tyler, if I died, or like if there's like an opportunity, like me and my child were drowning, I told Tyler to save me instead of our child because we could always just have more kids, you know.
"You say that now. That is what people without children say."
I said that I don't have kids, but I mean the same thing.
If
Cass
you
is
were
basically my
pregnant, I
kid.
could make that sense.
If I was pregnant, okay, pro-abortion
Yeah, usually
Mariah.
people are like,
Go ahead.
because people will be like, "Oh, if I'm pregnant and you have to choose between me and the baby, choose the baby." And it's
That's
just like,
stupid.
brother, I got other kids. Like
Yeah,
I gotta take care of them.
yeah. That baby hadn't even taken a breath of fresh air.
I'm naming that baby Heaven because that's where they're going.
You just save them from like suffering. Honestly, who's the bad guy? You would think Christians would love this. Straight to
You
baby
would
heaven.
think,
I don't know how we
no,
start
they only
talking about.
support that if we're invading other countries, because then
Oh,
it's
there's our timer.
fine to,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you think that's interesting that like the Christian like Zionists are like fine with like the white phosphorus bombs that get dropped on Palestinians, which causes like miscarriages, birth defects, and just like it decreases overall like mortality like rates for children in general. Like
it's
the
because
opposite of being pro-life.
I think it's because they're not actually like pro-life in the sense, because you can tell even adoption agencies to actually like put children that are in like terrible home situations into good home situations or things like that, or like
Yeah, they don't
prioritize
support
the
any sort
health
of like
of
socioeconomic
children.
things. They're anti-union.
Yeah,
They're
like they
anti
don't,
like universal health care.
like I think they just say it to feel like they're on a moral high ground when know that they're not actually. I think
I mean,
is
they're the same fuckers that are like, I support the death penalty, but then they don't actually like look at death penalty statistics and how like it's disproportionately targeted towards like black inmates, like historically and to this day.
yeah.
Like
And I
marginalized
think,
communities are affected by death penalty,
or
not
not even
white
that too. And
rapists.
then
That
it's
doesn't
like
happen.
they're like, oh, all of these countries that like that they want to say that are like in caveman eras and stuff like that, or like that are places that are still have the death penalty and stuff like that. And those other countries are like criminal and they're like authoritarian fascist regimes. But then we have it here. It's like baby girl America, you know, like because
Which
you
we do like
know,
the
I think is it Japan or China? Some Asian country has it or whatever, and they're like, oh my god, this is so wrong. But then if we have that going on here, they're like, oh my god, so true, government. You know?
democracy. They're like the democracy bots from Fallout.
Don't know what that is.
I don't know what they're called. No, they're like little robots in LA. For democracy, die, commie scum, and then they like. No, you haven't gotten that far in Fallout.
No, I've only watched this show. I only played like an hour of regular Fallout. I got out of the vault and I said,
Oh.
I'm done.
Anyways,
Okay.
thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you again. If you are an author and you want to send us books to review,
We will take them.
do
Just email
it.
us.
I'll take it. I'll read
Or
it.
DM
I'll read
us.
anything, but you're gonna get my full review. Yeah, you could
Yes.
DM us on Instagram or shoot us an
TikTok.
email to
I don't know if our email's anywhere.
LiteraryLiberation1 at Gmail.
Yeah, that is our email. I don't know if our email is listed anywhere, like online. That's how I was just saying. But you can email us, DM us, Instagram, TikTok. So if anything, you could probably also DM Mariah on the Hunger Guy account, because Mariah does have more followers there. For now. Just kidding.
Yes, for now. Hopefully we can get the podcast page out more, and then I can slowly stop posting on it and just do this.
You don't want to do... You don't want to
It's
post?
so stressful. I like my nonfiction books, but it's a lot.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for listening. That is all. Goodbye, and good night.